Okay, guys, I don't know how many of you, 15 of you here. We're about to look at this game which just finished, hot off the press, the chess press. I've just been witnessing it a bit on chessgames.com, although there's other sites as well. But alright, okay, I saw a bit of the action earlier. D4 from Magnus. Okay, and Naka plays D5. Yeah, we're live right now. Going to cover. Well, you can hear me, can't you guys? Sorry, I don't have to type, do I? You can hear me. So we're about to cover the Carlsen game. Yeah. So, is the board good enough? Board big enough? Yeah, I can carry on. So, C4, E6. Your bog standard Queen's Gambit declined. With Bishop E7, clever little waiting move, rules out Bishop G5 of course, so is White going to have to play Knight F3? That's the question. No, well he does C takes D, which is very popular here. Forget Knight F3. Now Bishop F4, still not developing the knight, because this is a clue there's other intentions, that Magnus is going to put his king over here, rather outrageously. Queen C2 is definitely looking more on the cards that he's put his king on the queen side, which often is very risky. So Bishop G4. Okay, what does Bishop G4 do? Maybe it's going to zigzag to attack along this diagonal. Okay, so E3, Bishop H5. The zigzagging starts. We'll exchange off anyway for this guy, this light squared bishop. So is Black's position okay at the moment? It looks to be okay. So Magnus simply takes and doubles Black's pawns. The H file dynamic is of no relevance if White's going to castle here. So castles. So Knight F6. Right. So can White either like play in the centre maybe, or has he got another intention? And what to do maybe about Knight H5, that could be dangerous because of this H file dynamic. So F3, so this implies that either G4 or E4 might be on the cards, and also if G4, maybe G4 then Knight E2 to G3 for G5. Okay, so Knight E2. So the queenside attack starts. Black doesn't bother castling just yet. E4. So there's problems in the centre. One problem, if Black prematurely plays B4, sometimes White will get the C5 square. It can play King B1, Rook C1 and play positionally on that C5 square. So B4. So maybe is Magnus going to play this idea? Trying to get control of C5. It also stops C5 from Black. He does. High PXL. So takes. So White's got a good control of C5 positionally. I've seen many games actually. I remember Chris Ward playing very aggressively against the Queen's Gambit decline, castling queenside. I was very impressed. And sometimes, you know, it just ended up controlling C5 positionally, changed its tune like the game. So Queen A5, King B1. So that means that Rook C1 and White can start to exert pressure on the C file and keep a bind on the C5 square. Okay. Castles. So Naka castles. His king at the moment doesn't look to be in too much danger. In fact, H4, H5 seem to be ruled out. You know, the double pawns are quite defensive. That doesn't seem to be a major tempting thing to do here, as well as obviously weakening G4, which might be useful. This is the game just played between Magnus Carlsen with White against Hikaru Nakamura, that's Black, or Naka, I'd rather say. So, okay. As many of you know, Nakamura praised my YouTube channel recently. So, I was kind of biased towards him wanting to win with Black. I believe it's classical time controls. Okay, so H4 anyway. So, what's happening here? Why isn't Black able to defend with, say, Knight takes H5? Maybe it's going to be like G4, Knight G3, Queen H2, this H file. So maybe H5, knight takes H5 is still tempting for white. E5 first, dislodge the knight. Ah, that's a snag. If there's no knight H5, this pawn's going to plough in and open the H file. So knight D5, so the pawn's ploughing in, H5. Oh dear. So has black got any tricks though, like B3, you know, to vacate B4 and then knight B4? Maybe that's a little trick. Or C5 at some point. But this H file is a big concern with G6 being targeted now. So G5. A clever defense by Necker. Actually, Magnus plays H6. Okay, he carries on the attack. Later I witnessed this bishop retreating though to C1. That's going to happen soon, I think. But first, this pawn is absolutely dangerous here. If it's taken, it will probably be slaughter time for the black king. We can imagine it looks like a bog standard hack attack. Very easy to win that position. So the pawn is left there instead to keep this road closed. But the pawn is strategically, tactically useful still on H6. So the constant threat held over Necker is this H7 as a constant threat. That's what I witnessed later. So knight B6. So the queenside attack, is there one? With C5 under such great control, I don't know. Knight C5. Bit of a bind on the queen side. Maybe... you know, it's difficult without C5. You know, these pawns are kind of a bit wretched actually. They're almost like they're kind of dislocated from each other, these guys, with this C5 bind. So bishop takes C5, D takes, and now that opens up the D4 square for usage. You can imagine actually later this was important for this diagonal. This D4 square is kind of critical here. So B3, finally using a little tactic as well to accelerate something on the queen side. But takes, not taking with the pawn, which could be even more, that would be like fatal on A2, I think, taking with the pawn. Immediate fatality for A2. So he had to take with the queen. Okay, but then haven't we got a scary B file? Haven't we got scary stuff happening with the B file? Queen... takes the pawn, but I think here Magnus okay, so knight D4, hang on, there's a magnificent move coming up. Okay, so knight D4, what does this threaten? Maybe there's E6 to try and break up the black pawns, and then G6 will be a target. So E6 is on the cards after knight D4. What else did knight D4 do actually? Well, the queen had access to the third rank anyway. This H7 is also always dangerous here. It's also sacrificing the E5 pawn, of course. Why was E5 sacrificed? So black is actually now a pawn up. And rook E5 defends also the bishop, you know, against bishop G5. So how does Magnus proceed here? Knight F3 hitting, forking these guys, so he can get his pawn back with advantage. Knight takes G5, and now there are nasty threats again. H7 and F7 needs to be watched over. So it's starting to get a little bit tricky, and I think some commentators at chess games thought black's in big difficulty here. This rook might be a tempo gaining target as well. So queen E7. Now I thought this was like one of the key moves of the game. You know, because I like the center of the board, like a centralized queen can go strike in all directions. And where does Carlsen want his queen here? He wants it on D4 because it's striking all directions, particularly though G7. Remember this pawn's there? So if he can get his queen to D4, that's going to be amazing. Great, you know, huge flexibility. I know these squares are not available at the moment. but huge flexibility, right? If he can get his queen to d4. So what does he play? Queen d3. Two moves to get there. Queen d4 will be threatening mate. Big problems for black. And also it ties down against f6. There's now queen g6 as well. The game's just finished. We're doing live commentary now. So queen d3 I thought was a star move in the position, because I don't think black's got enough dynamic potential to counterattack against the white king here. I was searching for things like knight a4, c3 check, use the b file. Doesn't seem to be enough time, unfortunately. And Naka's a bit desperate actually very soon. After rook f8, well, he's fending that f7 pawn. Passive move. Okay. It's difficult position. More pressure's put on f7. It looks difficult. There are tactics going on. Like, you know, if queen e5, you might think queen e5 is useful, or you might think knight a4 is useful. These all take time, but queen e5 in particular might be rudely interrupted with check, then the king moves, then a deflection tactic. You can imagine a deflection tactic with knight f7 forking e5 and h8. So this pawn can cause a tactical disaster in many variations if it's going to sacrifice itself on h8. So the e5 square might not be ideal tactically for black to make use of if he wants to organise a counterattack. So what does Naka do here? Well, he plays f5, which means actually he's shielded the f6 square from the rook. So he now gives access for queen f6, which might be useful in conjunction with knight a4 and a rook b8 at some point. Unfortunately, all the engine analysts were thinking black's already busted, I think. Now, I think it's like +3 or something. Or it's a disaster because of the natural looking peeling move. The weakness of the last move here, f5, although it might have some merits to it to try and get a counterattack. Unfortunately, the peeling move g4 looks like a logical undermining move, just tearing open the lines. It's a disaster if fg, of course, queen g6. But otherwise, f5 is really, it looks so simple, Magnus's play, but it's simple and devastating at the same time. But there's also this magic of the centre, these constant continual, you know, centralising frets as well, this fret as well. All these frets are being, you know, hung over poor Nakamura. So what does he play here? He plays knight a4. So is this dangerous enough counterplay? You know, things like this and rook b8, you know, to pin the queen. And the option now of queen f6, of course the pawn's shielding f6, so the queen can also coordinate. Well, what happened? And this is where I didn't see because I was in a cube bullet tournament. So now, queen d4 is used. So there's the immediate threat here of h7 just winning on the spot, because the queen's now covering the dark squares. The knight's covering that escape point. So queen e5 blocking that. So what does Magnus do? He just takes the queen rather cruelly, very forcing. What has he got up his sleeve? He takes on f5. Is h7 going to be devastating? That's the key question. He doesn't even play it yet. He still maintains the threat of h7. So knight f3. What does this mean, knight f3? Does it mean knight d4 to f5? Does it mean knight d4 to e6? Does it just mean this check has been made available? Okay, I wonder what the weapon of choice here is. Check. Okay, so king h7 is not a good blockade because of knight g5 check, it would seem. But king h8 doesn't look that pleasant because we've always got this diagonal, haven't we, to get to the black king with b3. You can imagine a check. There might be king c2, king a1 or something, king a1, and then bishop b2. Oh dear. So king h7. So we have whoa, a nasty tactic. Forget knight g5. If takes, king takes, there's bishop h6 just skewering the king and rook. Oh dear. But if he doesn't take it, it doesn't look particularly good after king h8. There still might be something like taking and b3. So these other constant threats are being held over black. So is he going to use b3 here, I wonder? It gains a tempo. The king is on that diagonal for the dark squares. It looks like an intuitive move to play to me. b3. Not yet. Again, it's kept in suspense. So, the rook's reinforced. Black cannot take now. It's protected, just winning the rook. Oh dear. What else is threatened? Well, b3 seems to be the major threat. Maybe there's also knight h4 to g6. That threatens mate. Knight h4 to g6. Oh, this is unpleasant. So rook, that rook moves to e8. So which one is it going to be? b3 or knight h4 or something else? Knight h4. Ouch. So here f5 is also now a problem. If takes, you might consider knight f5 for knight h6 being strong. So is this what happened here? It seems that's the end of the game. Maybe Nakamura had resigned here. This is like Mozart, I think, this game. It looks so dead simple and cute, but behind the scenes there's tons of variations. What do you guys think? We've just witnessed an attacking Mozart game. It just looks too easy, doesn't it? It's unbelievable, isn't it? Let's go back. I mean, this is from a bog standard kind of Queen's Gambit declined, finding, you know, a very nice system of attack. Just taking, and bishop f4, already with the intentions, just going to play queen c2 and castle queenside. Not minding black's seemingly vicious intentions with b5 later, because he always knows the c5 is going to be good strategically when that happens. If black's too quick with the pawns on the queen side, could weaken some key squares. So that c5 was definitely made use of. Now, big bind on c5. Black hasn't got enough energy to peel open and use the c file against white's king at the moment. The king's just going to sidestep itself, then the rook will add more pressure to bear on c5. So queen a5, so king b1. So c5 is a strategic square at the moment to use. Forget about any attack on the king side. The art of war is you put yourself beyond defeat before going on to the attack, which is Nimzovich as well. Nimzovich talks about you know, preparing first and making sure the position's safe before going on to the attack as well. So we have a safe position here on the queen side, kind of stable. I suppose you've got to be on the lookout for b3s, but apart from that, it's not a big problem. So e5, but now, you know, b3s do look like a big problem. So one clever thing about Magnus's plays, he doesn't play b3 himself. He's never tempted for that. If he plays b3 himself, he could probably be in trouble with knight b6s. So he plows instead into the king side, leaving him with a very dangerous pawn very soon. This scenario here, the bishop sack as well, is just this is just brilliant coordination on h7. So that'll be winning. So that pawn is left now on h6, and the bishop just retreats. So later we see the bishop actually has evil intentions behind the scenes on that diagonal. So here knight b6 and now knight c5. Black's knights almost look dangerous, but they never quite can coordinate an attack on c3 in this game. So d takes c4, sorry, d takes c5. So there's centralizing maneuvers in the offing later with queen d3 to d4 to coordinate with this pawn, which is usually marking out g7. So b3 finally used to try and accelerate the b-file attack, but it seems too slow as the evidence of this game. And actually that's not still bad for the queen remaneuver later. like this. So he takes knight d4, offering e5, because now actually the knight's going to attack these guys. So that happens, attacks these guys, gets his pawn back. Maybe this is a mistake, the rook e2. That was shown as a mistake, I think, by some of the engine analysts on chessgames.com. Maybe a different move here, but I don't know, it looks difficult. Should we stick on an engine just briefly here to see what the engine view is? Rook e7, white was better anyway, but just more better after rook e2. So bishop g5, advantage to white. From a technical point of view, it was bad news. Okay, so let's go on. So rook e2. Oops. Rook e2. So unfortunately, that rook, although it's pointing at b2, it's a bit of a tactical vulnerability for a tempo gain. So queen d3. I suppose queen e7 had the idea of protecting e2 as well as attacking g5 and defending f7. But now f7 again defended. Why didn't Naka take on g2 instead of queen e7? Did I miss something horrible? PXL. If he takes on g2 here, that's an interesting question. I wonder just about queen d4, you know, eyeing just threatening mates, because there's no queen e5 now, remember, because the rook is not here for queen e5. That looks pretty dangerous. f6 looks really ugly looking. But let's just check this position with an engine as well then. Oh, in fact, the killing move is apparently h7 and rook de1. So what happens after rook de1? Say queen d7, check. Blimey, knight e6. What? What? This is complicated, isn't it? Winning the rook. So that rook's a tactical vulnerability, as that variation shows. Queen f6, someone said. Queen f6? You want to play rook takes g2? I think that's a bad line. Sorry, queen f6 where? So we're playing here. If we play queen f6 here, apparently check, or rook, even rook ef1, just moving the rook again is crushing. What's happening here? Just check. Queen h3. So that's double attacking these guys. Mate in 15. Mate in 10 on king h8. It's coming to a mate in 10 here, this position. Whoops. Okay. So it seems rook g2 doesn't do the job here. So rook f8 was played, and we saw rook f1. And now this move f5, just asking for g4, which was played, an intuitive move backed up by the engine analysis as well, just tearing open the lines. So the surprising here is, you know, Magnus is not afraid to exchange off queens. He's still got a raging attack with the rest of his pieces. It's an enormous amount of tension to have, actually, don't you guys think? Just with 4 pieces, but with this pawn, it seems the attack is well and truly still alive. This pawn is like the 5th attacking piece. What do you guys think about that? It seems to be a raging attack even with the queens off. So takes knight f3, attacking the rook, check, and now this horrible tactic rook g7. He's content just to win the exchange after takes you know, bishop h6. So rook g1. So there's a vicious threat of knight h4 to g6 among other things, as well as b3 and bishop b2 potentially. So he uses that immediate mate threat of knight g6 here. That would be mate. And here Naka resigned. Let's engine check this final position. So rook g7 or hg. Rook g7 is far more effective. It still threatens knight g6 mate. So that would be mating the black king. So say rook e6 to try and defend that mate threat. What's the best move? Knight g6 or knight f5. Either will do for a big advantage. If just wants to win the exchange, knight g6. And this is a hopeless ending, I expect. c6 will drop. Or, in fact, rook g7 even stronger, just cutting off the king in the ending. Pick off this pawn. And maybe play b3 at some point, or just a4. It's all over there. Anyway, you get the picture there. Okay, hope you enjoyed that, guys. I'm going to save this file now. It'll be on livestream.com, King's Crusher in the video archive, hopefully. Thanks very much.